Yokoso minasan, I am the Anubasu and welcome back to another episode of Anime School of Business, where we look to the anime world to teach us real practical lessons about how to be a better management in today's business world. Now for today's lesson, we're going to depart a little bit from the human race and we're going to take a little bit of a walk on the wild side. So pack yourself an egg sandwich because we are going to learn some leadership lessons from the world of Beastars. Castillo, could you help the audience get in touch with their wild side for a minute? The story of Beastars follows Legosi, an introverted wolf trying to abide by society's expectations of a carnivore in a world where they live alongside herbivores in a mostly peaceful existence. His nature is constantly challenged by characters like Haru and Louis as the series explores deep themes of prejudice, romance, societal expectations, all under the clever guise of a high school anime, but exemplified through animal tendencies. Now I went into this series with really no expectations and I was quickly taken in by the depth of the subject being covered and how the animals' traits were used to so accurately describe societal class issues. Now season 2 is coming soon to Netflix in America, so it's a great time to catch up on the first season. But there's a lot more to Beastars than just a, mismatched love story. Oof, that actually that hits a little bit closer to home than I thought would. So let's take a look at the first of our 3 leadership lessons from Beastars, courtesy of Louis Senpai. The deer with no fear. A deer man. We'll go with deer man. Deer man always in control. Louis is out to prove to the world that he will be the next Beastar, and he oozes with confidence. A rare trait anywhere, much less in high school, although it's often misplaced during that time. Louis is an obvious choice for a leader in the show, and probably most of you are not surprised that I would select him. But what leadership style is he portraying exactly, and how effective is it in the real world? Now, as the character of Louis evolves throughout the story, we see the mixture of his character, which is a mixture of overconfidence, but also his continuous effort to ensure that everyone sees him in a very specific way. But above all else, Louis walks the walk, and he talks the talk. And he wants to make sure that he is seen in the best light of society and is always doing what is best for the Beastar Society.
公共の場で牙を剥くのはマナー違反だ。あんたもなかなか大変だね。次のビースターの称号を狙うとなりゃ。ビースター。この称号を知らない動物はいない。学校全体の統率を担い、この世界の差別や恐怖を超越する英雄的地位。この世界にビースターが必要な理由を考えたことがあるのか？ひがむ前に自分を正す。
The leadership style that he is exhibiting is called pace setting, although it's more commonly known as leading by example, probably something you have all heard of at this point. It is a simple and effective, yet tried and true style of management. Louis speaks and acts exactly how the model society member should, even when it goes against his own personal feelings. We could easily hear him saying something like, for the greater good, definitely.
よくあることだ。もう手遅れだよ。何言ってるんですか？分かったような口利くな。お前みたいに弱者ごっこを楽しんでのうのうと生きている狼に何がわかる？言い聞かせろ。言い聞かせろ。自分に。嘘もごまかしも平和のためなんだよ。
Now, often managers that follow this style of leadership are following some kind of set of rules or a set of traditions or basically a rigid core sense of self that they feel they have to stick to at all times and they're unable to show weakness, even if they're enduring very difficult times or even enduring pain, as we can see from this clip.
今日と明日を乗り切ってすぐ病院に行けばいいことだ。プレッシャーには慣れている。周りに目を向けなければいい。
Now, in today's working world, leading by example is kind of an expectation, if not a basic expectation of most leaders. Because, for instance, if you're not willing to walk the walk and talk the talk and do the work yourself, well, why should anyone follow you and do it for you? That's the basic theory there. But you might be surprised to find that there's actually some counter theories to this and some people that don't think this might be the most effective way of being a leader. And it turns out there may even be some risks to being a pace-setting style of leader. Let's take a look. One of the first questions you have to ask yourself as a pace-setting style leader is, can you actually do the work? The higher in management you go, the likelihood that you can be better at every other person's job than they are is not only unlikely, because you're probably overseeing a wide variety of jobs and skills, but could also be dangerous. Why would it be dangerous, you ask? Well, this actually leads us to our second point. If you're so good that you're better at everyone else around you at their jobs, some thought leaders would say that you have not surrounded yourself with enough talented people that challenge you. Steve Jobs is famously quoted saying, "It doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so that they can tell us what to do." By surrounding yourself with people better than you, as a manager, you avoid becoming paralyzed by the dreaded yes man, stifling your own growth and the growth of your business. Now, a third counter argument to this is that doing something is not really a good use of managers' time and skill set. Your skill set is supposed to be leading, improving, making the team more efficient and more effective. The military is a really good example of this. A good marksman, for example, a good sniper, does not make a great general all the time. And similarly, a great general may not be the best sniper on the team. That is a different skill set than doing a set task that's needed, like being a marksman. So are you really managing just by doing it well and setting an example? And if you are always doing things, are you stifling the growth of those around you who need to make mistakes in order to learn themselves? So as you can see, leading by example can definitely be effective in some cases, but there is a lot more to management than just being good at doing things. My advice to you would be this: lead by example in things that matter Yeah, lead by example in things that matter. Very simple advice. Good. You're welcome. End of video. Thanks for joining us. Let's try that again. A good piece of advice is to lead by example in traits, not tasks. For instance, personality traits you want to see on your team, like kindness, like effective communication, like an analytical mindset. These are personality traits that are really best learned by example, but don't focus on the task of what they're actually doing. That you can let the team figure out for themselves. Your role as a manager is bigger than just being great at a bunch of tasks. You need to focus on making the people themselves great, and then building a great culture around those people. And that is a very different skill set than being good at XYZ tasks. Now for our next lesson in leadership, we're gonna take a little trip to the meat market. Okay, that sounded bad. No, not that meat market. No, get those hunky dudes away from here. That's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about a literal meat market, because we're gonna go meet a side character who's actually a pretty good example of a certain type of leadership. We're gonna go take a look at Panda. Gohin, or Panda, exhibits multiple management styles, enough that we could probably do an entire episode just on this character alone. For example, his quick to punishment style of accountability enforcement, analytical tracking methods, or even his prodigal son style of management are all interesting, but we will focus on an underappreciated trait: experiential management. Not to be confused with experiential marketing, which is marketing the enjoyment of an involvement in experience. That's different. But the focus is similar. The depth of one's experiences have profound impacts on them, as experiences are far more emotionally ingraining than classroom education or data you may have read. Panda, more than any other character in this series, has developed his views and methods based on years of experience, watching other animals struggle with meat cravings, and he has tried to help many of the victims. Managers that have a lot of experience tend to have a tool belt of tips and tricks that'll help them kind of avoid dangerous situations or even dodge pitfalls, for instance. A lot of times they can use this experience to look at a problem and quickly figure out what the root of the issue might be based on their previous experience. Now Panda, by taking his years of experience in dealing with these victims, he's created a very simple tool that helps him quickly discern if someone's feelings are real or if they are just a victim of their own cravings. And he uses this with Legosi. Let's take a look. Now, obviously, being experienced isn't exactly a management style in itself, but it is a very important and very beneficial trait, and sadly it's sometimes a scoffed at trait. For instance, think about a young, hip tech company who is trying to bring in a much older but much more experienced manager into that workplace culture. Sometimes that relationship doesn't quite work out. Now, on the other side of that coin, I've been in a ton of interviews in which someone's showing up in front of me with a great degree, coming from a great school, and got incredible grades. Maybe they're even a certifiable genius. But then they're sitting here confused as to why they can't go straight into management, into the workplace, because they have so much great things behind them, but they lack real experience. And why that matters all boils down to this. At the end of the day, being a manager requires you to get buy-in, and buy-in is essential for your success. Buy-in is effectively getting those around you to do what you want them to do when you want them to do it. Now, a really good way to get buy-in is to give them a reason to believe you're good at what you do. Sometimes the educated but inexperienced candidate knows the right textbook things to do, or maybe even say, and sometimes they can learn on the fly the nuances of any job. We call that fake it till you make it strategy in the business world. But someone who has been through a challenge before, or been through a challenge many times, can speak from personal experience and generally convince a group that has never taken on this challenge before to handle this task in a very specific way, knowing that it's come out good for them in the past. This is the power of the real life experience, and it is very persuasive at generating buy-in. One of the biggest, God, I'm crushing it on the first sentences today. One of the biggest pieces of advice I find myself giving young managers who find themselves quickly growing in the business world, maybe jumping through levels of management faster than they were probably used to, is slow down. Experience takes time to generate and is irreplaceable. Eventually, that lack of experience is going to catch up to you. It might be a pitfall that someone else would have missed that you fall right into. It might be a bad judgment call that maybe you wouldn't have made if you had seen a few more things along the way. Or it might be a point where you're hitting people that are far more experienced than you that you're working with, and you're no longer able to generate the buy-in you need as a leader to persuade them. Now, Panda has all the necessary experience to do what he's trying to do, and he uses it very persuasively and very effectively to try and help Legosi overcome his situation.
仲良くしたいと願っているのもお前の本音だろうがな。そりゃあくまで理性の声だ。ズタズタになるまで食ってやりたい本能のカモフラージュだよ。
Now, our final lesson today comes from the main canine, our furry man himself, Legosi. Now, throughout the series, we mostly see Legosi kind of dealing with himself. He's dealing with his internal battles of doing what he feels like he should do, or maybe what he wants to do, versus what he feels society expects him to do, and the constraints put around him for being a wolf. Now, this leads us to a very important final lesson, one that I think we can all benefit from, and one that I personally have struggled with many times in my life. And that is this: to really become a good leader, do you need to become what others think you should be, or can you be truly yourself? The Beastars story is ultimately a journey of watching Legosi come to terms with who or what he is, and embracing the natural talents and strengths he has to accomplish what he wants in life. Now, we all have natural inclinations, just like Legosi, as different strengths than, say, Haru. These are traits we are just better at without much effort compared to other traits in ourselves or in others. Here's a good example of one of Legosi's strengths. A key part of being an introspective and effective manager is keenly knowing your own strengths, but also being aware of your own weaknesses, paying tribute to them and trying to improve them over time. And even better yet, as we talked about earlier, you don't necessarily need to become great at all your weaknesses, just surround yourself with people that make up for that lack, that are the experts in that field where you're not. Going back to the fact that you can't be better than everybody else around you. Legosi is only able to fully achieve his goal of saving Haru by allowing his strengths to fully manifest and be used to their true potential. Now, if he had been any other type of animal, he may not have chosen the fight his way up the tower route. Perhaps he would have focused on stealth, or maybe trickery, or maybe he would have used diplomacy to talk his way through the tower. There's many ways to infiltrate that tower, just like there are different classes in the fantasy role-playing games, and there's different management styles for different people, and you need to figure out which one is the best fit for you.
こいつらみてえに戦闘に特化した猫科に狼のお前が勝つ唯一の方法はその顎を使うこと。
Now, here's a really personal example of what I mean by this. My natural strength is towards a more analytical mindset, and I'm not as strong in the really, emphatic side of things, really feeling how other people feel. As such, Quite honestly, I'm not really the best cheerleader, rah-rah type of manager there is. And this is a real shame because the cheerleader manager can be very effective in the workplace. So the fact that I don't have that skill set is a bit of a detriment to me. But my analytical mindset is a real benefit as well because it allows me to kind of work through very difficult and traumatic times in a business and help others stay even keeled along the way too. What matters here is that I need to surround myself with people that are those things, that is that cheerleader management style to balance me out and also so I can learn from them so I can start to get better and really balance out that weakness to improve upon it. But at the end of the day, I need to embrace my strength, which is my more analytical side, and use that to my advantage as a leader. In the end, the answer is ultimately both. You need to be yourself. You need to know your strengths and you need to use them to be most effective as a leader. However, you also need to balance that with your weaknesses, i.e. what others want or need you to be as their leader. Take some serious time to identify your own strengths or weaknesses, and don't ignore your developmental needs. We all have them, and that is okay. Being honest with yourself is part of being a good leader, just as Legosi learned throughout the entire series.
俺も分かってきたよ、ジャック。自分が狼に生まれた意味。
So now we've just identified 3 really interesting management lessons from the world of Beastars. But let's take a little time to reflect. How about you? Have you ever thought that maybe your boss wasn't really a good boss just because you could do something better than them? Or maybe you're tired of the times your parents are like, well, when I was your age, I've seen this and I've been through all this before, and you don't want to hear that because it's your parents and you're tired of hearing their stories. Or maybe you go to work every day and you kind of feel pressure not to let the real you out to the workplace and show them who you really are. And as a personal aside, if you're a furry, don't do that. Keep that itself. That's a home thing for you. Well, hopefully this episode showed you a couple different ways to approach these situations at work. And you know what? We all have something to learn. So thank you for joining me in another episode of Anime School of Business. Of course, on the next episode, we will be keeping things nerd casual. And this meeting is adjourned. Iterashai. All right, let's go change into the furry suit. Get to work.